Welcome back to Invisible Machines, a podcast where we explore the expanding world of AI agents and conversational technologies. I'm Josh Tyson, co-author of Age of Invisible Machines, a best-selling book all about the agentic approach to automation and the broader pursuit of organizational AGI. I am joined each week by Robb Wilson, CEO and co-founder of OneReach.ai. Robb and I wrote Age of Invisible Machines over countless hours of conversation, much like the ones we have each week on this podcast. Robb has spent decades researching and deploying conversational technologies, and Invisible Machines is where we share big ideas with fellow AI insiders. We're continuing these conversations in partnership with UX Magazine because attention to experience design is absolutely critical to the proper deployment of AI agents, or invisible machines, if you will. So with these AI agents continuing to alter the ways people interface with workplace software, Robb and I were really excited to speak with journalist Matt Alston about his popular Business Insider article, Everyone Hates Workday. Matt, who also wrote the popular 2023 Wired article, Your Project Management Software Can't Save You, joins us for a deep exploration of our multifaceted interactions with machines. Among other things, we look at how the UX associated with productivity software like Workday is distributed across a whole spectrum of users who have their own individual experiences with it. Generally speaking, however, people don't seem to like using software very much, which is noteworthy because the patterns we follow when operating software end up shaping our thinking. So as we move into a world dominated by conversational interfaces, the intertwined relationship between our minds and these tools matters more and more every day. This fascinating conversation with Matt draws from his own experiences using software like Workday as a well-established copywriter, opening a rich discussion about the work of getting work done. So let's get started. Invisible Machines is produced for UX Magazine in partnership with OneReach.ai. Named a leader by every major analyst group, OneReach.ai's Generative Studio X platform was built specifically to facilitate the no-code orchestration of AI agents. GSX is trusted by global giants like PepsiCo, PwC, Deloitte, and DHL, but anyone can experience the level of agent orchestration we talk about on this podcast through interactive demos at OneReach.ai. Now, on with the show. Yeah, Matt, so it's interesting. I feel like it's kind of really difficult to make an experience that bad even worse. So there's almost like a weird feat there. But it was interesting because we had a conversation recently with Greg Vert, who he leads digital transformation for Deloitte. So he's working directly with HR departments at large enterprises, helping them out with this stuff. And he pointed out that Workday, actually kind of gained traction initially because they replaced whatever kind of archaic HR system or software was available then. And they were renowned for their experience. So that kind of opened up this interesting hole in our brains. Like, what does it mean when a company that was once really good at UX has become emblematic of how bad you can be at it?
The thing that I sort of kept circling, and I think is ends up being the thesis of the piece, is that who's the user? Who's a good user experience for whom? If I'm an HR person at Bank of America, and the ratio of people that I serve to me is 280 to 1 or something like that. I'm making that figure up, but there's 130 million workers at companies in the country, and there's 1 million HR professionals. So take out all the small mom and pops that have 3 or 4 employees, and somewhere in there, 200 or 300 people to each HR person, and I'm the buyer of the software. I'm the person who implements it. My user experience is probably very good because my binary output is, did I get somebody hired, and did it give me enough people to put future employees through that hiring funnel to hiring managers and get the answer I want pretty quickly? Like, probably a good experience. I mean, I've talked to a lot of hiring managers who are also like, well, onboarding a freelancer is pure hell. But I think like from the perspective of your question, Workday is renowned for X, and now that they suck at X. It's probably like a shift in focus. Like, probably like launching a product is all about the demo and who sees it and what it feels like for everybody. And then the longer entropy has the ability to set in, the more lots of different people who work there have different KPIs for their jobs. They're like, well, who cares if a Bank of America applicant has to create a whole new profile to apply for a job at Spotify? I only work at Bank of America. I do not care. And that's not unreasonable. Yeah, my neighbor's brother is an HR guy and read the piece and was like, your friend doesn't get it at all. And he forwarded me a long text spiel from his brother that was like, my life is easier because of Workday, and your friend Matt is a moron. And I was like, well, sure, yeah, but mine is worse. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's, I would think you could sit in a conversation with someone who says it used to be good and say it still is. And you could sit in a conversation and say it used to be good and say that's not,
Yeah. I think there's a cycle. I think the way to, and what interested me when I read this article that you wrote, which I thought you hit on something really timely and profound, even though it's been there the whole time. The first principle of like, does anyone like any software? We just don't ask that question because there's no alternative interface. We're just like, well, some software is better than no software. And that's what your neighbor essentially said to you.
Yeah, it's better than
he said, well, like,
right?
The software I know, no matter how hard it was to learn it, is better than any other software out there that I'd have to learn, because learning is painful. But not only is learning painful, it's that moment where someone comes in and says, hey, I'm going to train you on how to use Workday. And you're like, okay. Then they train you. And then you know it. And then you go, wow, this is really lame. Why did they do it this way? Why did they do it that way? Why is this so confusing? And everyone goes, I don't know. It's just what they did.
Yeah.
And then you get through training, and then you get to your next job interview, and they go, okay, it's between you and somebody else. Do you know Workday? And you're like, yes, I know Workday. You get the job. And now you're like, oh, I like Workday. And I like that it's hard to figure out how to use.
Yeah.
Because now I can get jobs that other people can't get because I went through the pain of learning it. So now I like Workday, and I'm going to write long emails to people who are anti. Like I'm now, like, my incentive has now gone to like it, and I like that it's hard to figure out because if it's easy, then no one's going to ask, like, do you know Workday?
Yeah.
It's not going to be part of the interview criteria, and that investment isn't going to mean anything. And so I think there's like the world of people who will defend antiquated old UIs because they're incentivized to do so because they learned it and they feel like they have a skill. Like Oracle, I always put in this category. Like, it was so hard to figure out as a database, but once you knew it, you were in this club. And that club was like this elite, high paid. You got paid more than everybody else. It was hard to figure out. So you had to take all of these classes. And it was a bit of a weeding out process, right? It's sort of like why people get jobs with a college degree from Harvard, because there was like this weeding out process that happened of like, are you willing to put up with all the bullshit that you'd have to get here? Yes. Okay. Then you'll put up with all the bullshit in my company that I give you.
Yeah.
Without quitting.
In my line of work as just a senior copywriter, like now you have to know Figma Like that's just, if you haven't on a
Right.
team that uses Figma, like you might as well,
Right.
you might as well like be using like a legal pad and a pencil, to communicate.
Right.
And that has happened since only a few years.
Right. And what's amazing, actually, if you think about it, isn't like, why do we use shitty software that's hard to figure out? But like, why does anyone ever change? Like when Workday came out, it's funny because like one of my first companies was one of the first UX firms, and Workday was a client in the early days when they were disrupting, and they disrupted based on UX. That's how they disrupted the SAPs and everybody else. And then, and you wonder, like, well, why did anyone switch? Like, why? If basically the software is the easiest software to use, and it's a chicken or the egg, and these software companies eventually get to the tipping point of most people have already learned their software that need to know it, why does anyone even give other software an opportunity in the market? And maybe is it just because these companies at some level intrinsically culturally know that they have this advantage that they just stop investing in UX, and it just atrophies to the point where they're like inevitably gonna get so bad that people can't ignore it anymore? And they're like, or does somebody just come out with something that just seems so easy to use that they're like, oh, this doesn't look like it's going to be hard to learn?
Yeah. As an applicant, as an often applicant to smaller startups, 100 employees, employer brand really matters. You kind of are like, wait, what is this company? What do they do? Does this seem like real people? Does this seem like something that will exist in 3 years? And that is something that you have to, a company has to protect that. Like a company that makes their products and they have their marketing brand, but they also have their employer brand, and they need to, like to attract talent, they actually need to seem like, founded by a former Microsoft or founded by a former Google, blah, blah, blah. Like you'll see those as part of the pitch bios, and those aren't those aren't just for Silicon Valley. Those are for like to peel off Google or FANG guys,
right?
Who they might
the glass ceiling, right?
And but if you're Spotify, I sorry to say Spotify or whatever, I'm fine with Spotify, but if you're Spotify, you don't need to protect your employer brand with a good or bad application experience. It just doesn't matter. So you have HR people who say, every time I post a job to LinkedIn, I get 1,000 applicants. How do we resolve this? Workday can
make it harder to apply.
Yeah. By accident or by intention, doesn't it? That's the sort of the purpose of a system is what it does.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna go on accident because I doubt the sales pitch is hey, if you use Workday, fewer applicants will apply. Your employees will submit fewer expense reports because of the pain of figuring out how to do it.
I mean,
so the user license will save you money. The ROI is in how hard it is to use.
There. I just to go back a little bit there. I was reminded of there's this New Yorker writer, John McPhee, like legendary, nonfiction writer. Like about a decade ago, he wrote a piece about the software that he used to research and write pieces, and it was like on an. I will paraphrase and mischaracterize the specifics, but he essentially just had like a clunky old DOS computer and some program that some guy in the Midwest or somewhere had created, like Bootstrap, and he used it and bootstrapped it further. And he had written hundreds of New Yorker pieces and like dozens of books just on this like computer. And increasingly over the life of his career, like he would go back and check, and like he was one of the only like 4 or 5 people alive still using that software that was like still on a 3.5-inch floppy, that if like he put it, near a magnet, he would lose the backup copy. And, and ends up like getting in touch with the guy, and the guy's like, I don't even, like, you're still using it? What is wrong with you? And he's like, if I change the way I write my pieces with my software, it's like changing how I think. And I think like sometimes, the project management piece, an insight I kind of had when talking to people was that like certain types of UI, dragging a thing from left to right, like on a Kanban board, like when they become ubiquitous, they become the way people actually think about performing tasks. Like, I'm going to move this from the to-do column to the doing column to the done column. And like
right, which means it can't exist in multiple places. Like we've suddenly taken out the idea that the reality of the world, which is it can be in all three columns at the same time. I did a project a long time ago, not that long, but long for most people. It was all about reinventing education for a couple of the school systems, public school systems, and one of the biggest ideas was to just remove the concept of grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, to make it more gray. Like math, you might be in grade 1, reading, you might be in grade 2. So it was breaking down this concept that you just, it's like the stair-stepping of first grade, second grade, third grade. And it was amazing. It just turned it all into badges. Like you just got badges for certain things. It was a fantastic concept. It was incredible, the results. And what also happened is like the community could get involved. So you broke these education concepts down into really small pieces so that, bees, understanding bees was the badge. And it wasn't attached to grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3. It was just understanding bees. And within boundaries of a menu system, students could be like, that's what I want to do next. I want to learn about bees. But the local beekeeper could actually like participate. He knows what you need to learn. It's published what you need to get out of it. So on Saturday, your parents could take you to the local beekeeper. He could teach you those things. And then the teacher's job was just to test to make sure you learned it.
Right.
And then you get the badge, right? And so classrooms anyway, bottom line is the results were irrefutable. More like there was a high school, I don't remember exactly where it was, and that's more about my memory. And it was like they didn't have a single kid that had ever gone from high school to college in the history of the high school. It was a small high school in like the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden they implemented the system and half the kids went to college. It was like incredible, like undeniable, wow. But you tried to take it to the public school system, which was the job I was hired to. Like, how could we implement this? And they're like, all of our software has, like, the first thing you have to enter is what grade is your child in. Like, none of the software you could use. And so none of the schools could implement this because even down to setting up the classrooms and the layout of the school facility itself, this is the grade 1 classroom and this is the grade, everything required this thing. So our software, it's the whole like, I'm learning it wasn't we shape our tools and then our tools shape us. This idea that we created project management software and then the software that we created shapes how we complete projects and think about projects. Sorry, I went off on a complete tangent on you there, but you got me all excited about this because I feel like if we're all using the same software, then how are we going to evolve and be better than each other? Like, how are you going to get better than average results if we all do things the exact same way? So the idea that we have this cookie cutter rigid software interfaces that tell us how to think, tell us how to do things, how are you supposed to hire better than everybody else if you're using the same shitty processes that everybody else are using? Or maybe it's not shitty, it's just shitty at the moment everybody's doing it because it becomes average. And if you're trying to be above average, once you're average, you're shitty.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about like Workday is that it's not just a hiring platform. It's also a talent onboarding platform. It's also can be, like these big HR platforms can also do payroll. They can also do benefits administration.
Right.
They can also do career stuff, ongoing progress, check, whatever, reviews. And like, those are all also things that you have to solve for. And, like some of those come out of workplaces, right? Like, I onboard you, I have to take your I-9 or, W-4 and put it somewhere and hold on to it for the end of the year and make sure I scanned your passport or whatever. And like that's easy enough, right? Like that is a problem of scale. One person doesn't want to do that. What if we just make everyone enter their own and we just check it? What if we scale down software? Great. Like easy. Like that's great. Same with payroll, but like as soon as you introduce complexity, you have to have humans involved again, and a software just like can't start solving.
Right. It's rigid. Yeah. And then you get workarounds. Like, how do we put this into 3 buckets? Like, it's like you said, that example you gave, how do we put it into 3 buckets when the software doesn't let it exist in 3 places? Oh, I got to create 3 instances of it. I'll call them 3 different tasks, even though it's the same task. And you're like working around it, and then it's really confusing, right? Because you're like, well, why is there 3 tasks? Oh, because I couldn't put them into the same swim lane.
Yeah. Or to speak about project management software, like my job as a copywriter, I have 2 or 3 ongoing projects that might take me a few weeks right now, 1 or 2 quick hits. And then, someone slacks me and says, hey, can you look at this? Can you proofread this real quick? I do it. I send it back. My project management software treated brain, like you have the impulse almost like as a former bartender, I'm just like always want to wipe a surface down in the house. Like, it's like my brain is like, should I log adding that apostrophe to that guy's like thing for the, push notification, put it on the board, drag it to the right and call it done. Like, did anyone see my work? Did it happen? Like, does it, especially remote, especially like more digital workforces, like, a lot of these, the Kanban, the left to right, or the Gantt chart, the top to bottom dependent, X can't happen until, A can't happen until B happens, until C happens.
Right.
Those are from like building the Hoover Dam. Those are from railroads moving west. And like, I work with a designer. Our processes aren't necessarily dependent on each other. She can be, laying out a website and say copy TBD, or she can say, I can't design this to you, give me the copy. In either case, like, we're almost interdependent systems, and a structure that either links us as like consequent left to right, or like dependent waterfall, like can't do X until Y. Neither one of those really like lines up with some of the swirl of like modern work, especially iteration, especially ideation. It's easy for a product team to say, we want to improve conversion on X, but what are the variables? How are they dependent? Are they, as soon as you have 3 or 4 people, the combinations, the sort of factorial combinations of how many different ways something can be done don't really fit a system that is designed to be simple, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I think when you look at software itself and you go to first principles, you say, do people like using software? And the answer is yes, if it's a game. No, if it's productivity. Why? Because people don't like to do boring tasks. But we know with gaming, they really enjoy software. They get addicted. It could be addictive. So software can be anywhere from hate to love it so much you can't put it down. And then you sort of ask yourself, well, why is most of the software that companies use so hated? Right? If it could be loved, could it be loved? And the answer is probably because it's not designed to be loved. It's designed to make you more productive, and theoretically. And then there's a big question mark on, does it make you more productive or not, to your point? Or does it just make you more transparent and less productive? Like now somebody can see what I've done and feels like I'm busy, but am I more busy than I was? Or am I less busy because I'm so busy filling out the software
Yeah,
to make
renaming
sure
the doc
everybody knows
to
I'm busy?
to the right convention, putting it in the right folder.
Yeah.
Like the transparency part is also an important distinction and different about, like, because again, all these systems came out of factories and construction and really like
Yeah.
hierarchical systems where a person sat up in a balcony and looked down, and it's like, well,
Right.
that guy needs a break, or that guy's not as productive as that guy at building lathes or whatever, and so oversight is also like a huge factor in like how these systems work for the
Yeah.
people who aren't the individual contributors, but who are, the bosses.
Yeah. I think that if you go, again, like, I hate to keep rehashing first principles, but I think if you go up to the fundamental fact that most people don't like the software they're using, period. And most people dread learning new software. You go, software itself has a fundamental issue that we're not addressing because we haven't seen an alternative.
Right.
And so you go, well, what's the fundamental issue? It's probably what you said, which is one cookie cutter experience that's supposed to serve a large group of people. And so even if this software is configurable, which the bigger the company gets, the bigger the company that uses your software gets. In other words, as enterprises start buying your software, you have to make it more and more customizable. And that creates all of this complexity. But even still, it's a one size fits all. And the fundamental problem is our software is not adaptable enough. And then you see AI and you see this new interface that's about humans, which are very adaptable. Like, we know this because every call center puts a human there. Like, that's the most adaptable user interface there is. And we go, okay, and then you say, what if humans could conjure up micro UIs, like little UI components and pictures and songs and things, like images and videos on the fly to even improve their communication? So, like, now we go to cookie cutter to hyper personalized, like the other end of the spectrum. Now you can have a hyper personalized conversation with a machine where the interface is absolutely designed for you because it has your context. Now these companies don't have a stronghold on the sort of cost of learning something new, right? And it's like there is no learning anymore. I just ask the software, like, hey, I want to, can I submit this as an expense? It's like, sure, I just did it for you.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, well, thanks. Now what system are you using? Who cares? Like, wherever that data goes, it doesn't matter anymore. It just became, as the book we wrote says, invisible machine. It became invisible what software you're using. The machine became invisible because you don't care if you're talking to a person or a machine. And so it's why we think that this change from traditional UIs to this new micro hybrid UI language is going to be so fast and rapid and so massive is because software UIs as they exist today fundamentally suck.
Yeah. I have product guy that I work with who's training in a GPT to write his PRDs.
Okay.
You are this, you work for me. Everyone he makes himself, he puts in, and it's increasingly giving him much better and more specific PRDs for all the different kickoffs that he wants to do. And I think you're right. Like, his boss surely doesn't care what the process was to get the tool to kick off a sprint, to get the result that we want at the company. Do you think, and like, I won't care as a consumer someday if instead of Googling weather in Portland, Maine this morning, I just ask, I already do ask my little hockey puck on the counter, but like, I don't care what the gear turning on the other end is if it increasingly gives me good results. Could you imagine that same thing for HR tasks would reach and pass the tipping point where someone doesn't care? Do you think like someone is like, no, I actually want to know where the form is. I need to see it. I need to see. I need to see, because I don't believe that
look at Intuit and the tax return
owes you $3,000 in expenses or whatever, right?
Yeah, look at the tax return. Like, it didn't take long for us to go like, we don't want to fill out the 1040.
Yeah,
just ask us a bunch of questions. Like, Intuit got that super early. We don't want to fill out the 1040. I don't even care if I see the 1040.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't even want to know what a 1040 is. I just, like, ask me a bunch of questions, I'll answer it. Yeah, Intuit was like way ahead of the game on conversational UIs. It's just, why didn't everything go in that direction? Because I think, almost like oil, I think there's a lot of money right now in traditional UIs, and I don't think it's conscious, to your point. I don't think it's that the buyers know. I don't think that the sellers are really aware of it. I think the fact that UX is always this sort of side show in every company, except Apple maybe.
Yeah.
Because it's always relegated and siloed and like, oh, this thing we have, oh yeah, make it look good. I think they don't realize that that's
Apple. Real.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think they realize that most of the intrinsic value, that an app itself isn't an app without a UI. It's the bundling of features that make it an app. You take away the app, make it a bunch of API calls. It's not an app anymore. The app doesn't exist as a thing. The only thing that makes it an app is the bundling of features together. The only thing that bundles them together pretty much is the UI.
Right.
And so now if an app is a UI and we've changed UIs and we get rid of them, what is a company? What is an app company anymore? What is Workday without its UI?
Yeah.
And it's just a bunch of API calls.
Right.
And
that's all Trello and Asana are is, the API calls that look like a database.
Right. And we see this with these companies that are going, okay, well, we're going to put a conversational UI in sidecar. Like, we're going to sidecar the traditional UI with a conversational UI. But then they immediately start doing what you're saying. Oh, but wait, why wouldn't they want to do all of their tasks here? So they start to like sort of gobble up the world of software, going, all these companies now competing with other software vendors that they never thought they'd compete with. Workday competing with, accounting software, and so there. What at OneReach we sort of call it the Great Convergence, and my colleague Kevin calls it like Battle Royale is coming, because all of these major software vendors are all converging, and suddenly going to compete with each other. Where they never saw them in the space. It's like Gartner is sitting there going, all these magic quadrants are like turning into one magic quadrant.
Right.
Who's going to cover? Like, you can see like the battle beginning at Gartner for who's going to cover what, because they're all like converging on the same space because the UI is vanishing. And I guess the question is, how long can these companies, like just like the oil companies, how long can they hold on to this, until until the market says, why would I keep paying for these traditional UIs? The concept around this is point solutions versus systemic change, and that we're at that point where Workday adds AI, and that makes it more valuable. And everyone's like, wow, okay, I'm going to invest in Workday because they're gonna bolt on these AI add-ons, right? They're going to improve the shitty UI experience with point solution bolt-on features that are AI driven.
Right.
Summarize this, summarize that. And
Custom.
and all of a sudden it's going to fool you.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, wow, they're starting to make more money because of these AI bolt-ons. But then systemic change is like right behind it, which is the removal of the UI altogether, the traditional UI altogether, which is right behind it. So you see this like climb of like, oh, maybe they are going to survive. And then all of a sudden, bam, the disappearance of the app happens. And you go like, am I going to use Workday to get all my work done? Is Asana and Workday going to... This is where I was going with this long rant.
No.
Is Asana and Workday going to join together? And when were they going to join together so that you're just going to use both of them with the UI? And then what is Asana and what is Workday after that to your neighbor who's like adamantly defending Workday to you in that long email?
Or like, when does it hop the fence, and when does like Manpower or Adecco say, now we aren't the people who put people in touch with other people for jobs. We aren't the massive 30,000 person hiring company. We are the hiring company and platform. Like what? You could go either direction. You could go from like Workday toward other UI, or you could leave Workday, which is UI, and go toward the actual task, which is like hiring people.
Right. You're like, yeah, because a person just says, hey, I want a job at this company. And they say that to their AI assistant. That's it. Nobody's using anything.
Yeah. It seems like there's like a moment too UI. Where, these companies, like if there was a big company that was really, say, fed up with the experience their employees were having with Workday, there are tools out there that enable companies to start building their own ecosystem where they have a conversational interface that obscures all the messiness of Workday and also like other software they're using. It starts orchestrating it. And it seems like on a long enough timeline that actually, we write about in the book a bit, but if you pursue that goal, you're essentially starting to build a digital twin of your organization. Yes. And the more robust that digital twin becomes, it actually, I think, would start kind of mirroring that software. And so then that software becomes irrelevant. It moves so far to the background that now the ecosystem that you built to try and manage all this disparate software has now kind of made that software useless because it's adopted all the things it needs from it into its own password.
It's this idea that
ecosystem.
Like our AI... Sorry, Josh. I'm getting excited here.
Yeah.
The AI is going to operate our old software. That's the bottom line. Our current, we know it can. Now we know that LLMs can operate our old software, especially when it comes to using APIs. But even when it comes to clicking and pointing and clicking. We see this with Rabbit and some of these other technologies, RPA, creating RPA scripts, blah, blah, blah. So if AI can operate our old software, we're like, oh, cool, now I don't have to operate Workday. It will submit my resume for me using Workday. Cool. Workday's happy because they're still in the mix. And now there's an AI company that's happy because, they're operating Workday. Except at what point does anyone, any engineer, anybody with logic step back and say, wait, why do I need Workday? Because you start to realize that Workday becomes a hindrance to the AI. In other words, to your point, it's so rigid that the AI is going like, we don't need this antiquated thing in the mix. Let's skip the part where I put it in Workday. Then George goes into Workday to see what's been submitted, and I'm just going to send him a Slack message that says, hey, this has been submitted, FYI, skip the Workday piece and say, well, the only thing then is like, where are we going to store the data? That's all. It's just a data storage problem at that point. And you're like, well, you know what? If AI can operate the software, it can also retrieve data and put data and store data. And maybe I don't need to know where the data is stored because it just needs to know where it's stored.
Yep.
Which we know it can happen. So it's just going to store it wherever. I don't care where it stores it as long as it knows where to get it.
I already don't care where it stores it. Like,
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Just to your point, like right now you enter something in, your buddy, right? It goes into memory. Like, does he care where? He doesn't care. Where? He's not like, oh, where's that memory? Is that in Workday? He doesn't care. He just cares that the system knows where to put it when he wants to retrieve it.
Yeah, exactly. It is like,
and that it's safe.
Yeah, I met with this grad student, David, in Berlin. I interviewed him around the project management thing. He was a design student his whole thesis was like the graphic and visual design of project management systems. And he was super interested in like how it looks and your tool shape your thought of it. He was like, not like blue and green, but like, the sort of Windows versus databases versus spreadsheetification of these different things. And yeah, he was like, I think the end result of this is that none of this is part of it anymore. You just say, what am I working on today? Like, like I told, these are the projects. What am I working on today? And the thing says, you're working on this. It functions like a de facto person project manager, because I also think like interviewing a lot of people and just having a ton of experience with the project management stuff, the best systems are the one where one person is the project manager who runs the board and no one else is allowed to touch it. And then they just tell everyone what they're working on and when everything is due. Which is how that, your AI surrogate that goes between and then eventually replaces also would work.
I just, where I'm, we've been saying this for, God, how many years now, Josh? Like,
been a few.
10 years ago, I think you could go back and there's a version of this conversation where we're like, really soon.
Yeah.
All of our, because you look at Intuit and you're like, why wouldn't most software just be conversational? Like it's on its way, and then it doesn't come this way. And I think there's just so much money in antiquated software, just like there's so much money in oil.
Yeah, it's also familiarity. Like it is the thing you're saying, resistance. Everyone hates Slack and loves Slack. Like, the version of Slack that you could map onto what you're saying is, tell John I've done the thing, and it just does.
Yeah.
And but
what does it take, do you think, to change your neighbor's mind? Like, what is?
Well, I don't know. I think people do like typing at each other. Yeah, in that example, like I think people do like the like that's a little gamified. There's emojis. There's different threads. Like that software also like is a surrogate for sitting in an office sometimes. A thing that social people like. So, and then maybe my neighbor, like maybe he likes that part of his job. So like, some people do like the part of a job that other people don't. Like,
right.
I was a civil engineer a million years ago. That's what I studied in college. And I had I had a job where I counted traffic. Like it was like a entry level summer thing. I sat at intersections and punched buttons as cars drove by, and then loaded it into the computer and printed out the reports. And then we had to go down to like the thing and file like, the intersection of Edgecombe and Grant Street report, whatever, peak traffic volume or whatever. And I hated it, but I worked with a guy who like loved that part. He's like, I love just laying them all out, alphabetizing them, sorting them, putting them in the thing. Like that there was
It's a thing.
So like, right, like,
Yeah, it's funny.
Do
It's
we
funny you
need-
say that.
like, you know, that's the whole like AI replacing jobs. Like, do we need that guy to do that? Like, absolutely not. There is a much easier way, a much cheaper way to like store this
Yeah.
stuff. Email, people have argued that email is a functionally dead platform, like in many ways, and it's so, you know, choked by spam and choked by, you know, like, and choked by automated stuff and choked by onboarding and all these different things. And yet, like, you know, I'm not an inbox zero guy. I just still have like things from 4 years ago that's like a nice letter from a teacher I had in grad school. And it's like, they're like the parts of it that are familiar and tactile and feel like a letter, or, you know, the part about Slack that feels like a water cooler conversation. Like, sometimes I think people want UI. Like, they don't want it to completely go away, because the parts of UI that do mimic familiar and comfortable good parts of life. Ed Zitron, the PR guy who runs, who has a really good blog about workplace stuff, he writes a lot about return to office and how the reluctance of that is like a middle management class that kind of actually like we haven't reached peak efficiency as a society or as a working society, but like, you know, if it's true that Bank of America has 10,000 too many employees at any given time, maybe if that's true, there's a lot of people for whom, like my example, like people like slacking each other, people like receiving emails from friends or hold on to them because there's like a connection to a tactile workplace. Like his proposal was that like return to office was just because like, if boss can't see you doing stuff, or a middle manager can't like middle manage, you know, they don't have anything to do. Yeah, that like there's like my work as a copywriter is like continuously visible, because like even when this interview is over, I like have to send someone like an update to a web page, and like someone sees that, but the person who approves it, like their work product is just like the correct go through. And so like I wonder if there will be like an also intractable reluctance to adoption of tools that make the work invisible, because there is like whether you're a person who like finds great dignity in your work or extracts lots of power, like positive, negative, whatever the reason, like people like going to work, like, you know, my wife and I are both remote employees, and she like really misses living in New York and like getting on the G and switching to the L and going to Midtown, like for her job. And she has the same job she used to have. And like, I wonder if like I
think there's like a couple of things to unpack there. The first one is, I used to call this, I still do, the scarecrow effect. And I used to say a good manager has to like go above and beyond the scarecrow effect. And the scarecrow effect is more physical. Like you're in the office, you're the manager, and then orbiting you are people, and they know you're there. You're just like you're playing solitaire on your computer, right? But they know you're there, so they're all working, because at any moment you could come over. The scarecrow could like, oh, are you working? Like, so they sit there cranking away. Like all of a sudden the manager gets up and is sick that day, and nobody, like, productivity goes down. Because, so what is the value of the manager? Like, just the scarecrow, like, it doesn't matter if they do anything, just their sheer presence has an effect. And I was like, I don't want to give anybody raises. I don't want to hire people for just simply being a scarecrow. And you're like, well, what happens when it's remote? How do scarecrows scare crows?
Well, it seems like Microsoft Office is becoming the scarecrow, right? Like it, with all
it's with Slack, right? It's with Slack and Teams, like this ability to like
Slack,
see who's online. Are you online? Like watching your little status and then seeing all the conversations. So now you got like the virtual scarecrow effect, where you got these managers popping in to different conversations. Like, I'm watching. But now you got to like actually be talking to show you're doing work. Like if you're not communicating, like you as a writer, if you're just heads down for half a day, how do they know that you were heads down half a day? Unless you're like talking to someone about it.
Yeah, I definitely
on
don't
Slack.
Instagram my walk in the woods when I'm online.
Right. Yeah. So what are we doing at this point? Like productivity is like this is sort of the unpacking of what you said. But at some point you're like, well, why do you go to work? To be productive. Well, what if productivity isn't the measure, it's creativity? How good was the output? It doesn't matter how long it took you to get there. It doesn't matter how much time you put in. It matters how good it is. And if an AI could actually just look at your end product and grade it and say, like, from a creativity standpoint, how good is this? Or a person could, or a combination of AI and people, and we just get graded on the output, then ultimately work becomes about what? About interacting with other people and machines. This kind of all comes back to, like, if you fall in love with a machine like her, right? Everybody talks about that. Is that a life well lived, or does it have to be a human? If your coworkers are AIs and you're having a conversation with a AI, or you're having a conversation with other people, does anyone care? Does your boss care? Right?
Yeah. It's
I think your boss is like, cool, I only had to pay one. Like when you talk to ChatGPT to come up with it, like I only had to pay one person.
Yeah. Like I got an MFA, and when you would put up stories at your MFA, you know, they put the cone of silence on you, and you kind of have to sit there and listen to like your peers talk. Like it's worse than death. You know, it's the single most excruciating hour of your entire year, and you repeat it a couple times every semester. And I just had one professor who was like, I think everybody, and one of the rules was like, you don't really, like, you critique the work, like sort of a new criticism. You just like treat it for what's here. You don't ask questions. You don't make suggestions. You just like talk about it, and the person has to watch the room talk about it. Like, you know,
right.
Huck Finn watching his own, or Tom and Huck watching their own funeral. And like, one of my professors was just like, I am allowing everyone to make suggestions, because I read a thing about old Hollywood, how they'd always employ like one crank. They'd have like 7 writers in the room, and then one, like, they call him crazy guy. And he'd be like, what if we, you know, do this? And he would stretch the idea past the point of feasibility or acceptability or decorum. And then like that stretching would then give everybody else in the room to walk further up to the line. Like, and that is like, and you know,
permission to be creative, essentially.
Yeah. And that was like, that's the, that's where like, I can do that with my buddy when we send each other work. And I haven't found the model that can give you the like right hallucination, like, you know, to use the language model word, like at the right time. As adept as the models from my perspective are at like problem solving copywriting, when I'm asking it to do something a little more like intangible for me, and I get like not the version of that yet. And
yeah, I think it's just, if you think of what an LLM is, it's compressed knowledge, right? Which means normalized. So
yeah,
can it do outliers? Absolutely. There's like settings. You can get the unlikely. The problem is, just like evolution, the more mutations that you add, most of those mutations are going to be like bad. Right? They're going to kill the, like, most mutations end up in death of the organism that had it, then end up in an evolution, right? So this is the problem with LLMs evolving, is they have to be able to make a lot of mistakes, and that might be at our expense. So when you think of like customer service, right, you're like, hey, you overbilled me, and they come back, and the LLM comes back and says, well, great, I'm going to overbill you again. Like, it's just going to try different combinations to find that outlier mutation that actually works. So I think like that, that what it has to do, and that's just, I think, in the design, what we don't have is the closed loop. What you can do is come up with a crazy idea. And you said it, the guy comes up with a crazy idea. The rest of the room, it's a simulation, right? Everyone's running a simulation now. They run the joke, or let's say it's a humor, because I think that happens a lot with humor writing, right? You got the guy who goes way out there, the Mel Brooks in the room, that comes up with something, and maybe it's too out there to be funny. And everyone's like, no, that's not funny. What they're doing is they're running simulations. If the AI can run simulations, then it can work. Those outliers can happen, but it has to be like, okay, now I want you to run a bunch of crazy ideas in rapid succession, and then evaluate the result and come back with the ones that are actually funny. And we haven't seen that yet because we haven't prompt chained to that degree. We know it can evaluate. We know it can do a decent job of evaluating if something's funny or not. But you just haven't gotten to that place where you're like, hey, come up with crazy ideas and only the ones that actually might work.
Yeah, exactly. I worked at BarkBox, the dog toy treat, like the dog D2C company, and we part of my job was naming dog toys, like me and another copywriter, and we just it was all puns, it was all dad jokes. It was like, that was not just what the job was, but that was like the very best part of it. And our boss he would be like, all right, here's the list, here's the whatever, here's the voyage to Italy box or whatever, and we just sit down after a week later, once we decided the theme or looked at the toys, and just throw names at him. We would just do that. It was just every single one was an audition until one made him laugh. And it was like, I don't know how to teach understanding my boss Nick's vibe to anyone.
Yeah.
I know what will make him laugh and what will get the, but that's...
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those things too. It's like, we want to... Oh, go ahead, Rob.
We had this earlier episode where we came up kind of like future of work idea, and it's starting to coalesce. Like, one big part of future of work in terms of productivity, not in terms of socializing, is this hot or not decision. We're just going to be the human in the loop decider.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to get paid to say, is this funny? Is this funny? Is this funny? Swipe left, swipe right. And so AIs are going to come up with crazy ideas, and they're going to pay you to evaluate them. And because they themselves may not be a good enough judge of whether it is or isn't, or maybe they're just getting trained to be able to kind of predict what's funny or not. And so you'll just sit there, our day will just be swiping left and right on this. Do you want, what kind of, I'm going to buy this ink for your printer. Good to go. Yep. I'm going to, hey, is this funny? Yes, no. It's like we're all Mechanical Turk getting micropayments for AIs just running stuff past us.
That's not a creative director's job. Creative directors also do other things, but that is that is what my CD does.
Right. Right.
Back with another one. Come back with not there yet,
Yeah. And so if you're just the layer before him, hey, can you cut through the first layer and then narrow it down to 10 choices, and then he only gets 10. You had 100 that you weeded through.
So you
got 10 from you.
Is in jeopardy.
or your job just becomes yes, it tastes good taste.
Yeah.
You're just at the end of the day, that's what you are anyway, is running scenarios in your own head and then saying, this is the one this is good. So maybe your job is good taste, not the creating of it. And so you're just, at the end, the idea of all of the craftsmanship around getting to a product you can evaluate as good or bad, that shortens. And now you can, it's like a painter that paints over the same painting 100 times. The canvas is just thick with paint because they just kept trying different things until it was good. and then the bad painter only tried 3 things and then gave up.
Well, yeah. To push back though, how do you get that if the models replace, if we're just swipe left and righters, how do you gain, like, I would argue that you gain some of that taste through the process of doing that work that you would train your model to do for you.
Yeah, it's like a chicken or the egg. Like, what if the work that you're sitting there that's routine is the part of the creative process itself?
Right. Like, to bring it back, I'm going back to this flagstone walkway I'm going to be doing over the next week at my house.
Right.
I've gone on Reddit and people are like, hey, here's my flagstone walkway. What do you guys think? Because it's someone who's done it for the first time. And
right.
A common response is, well, what do you think? It's your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the person has no expertise. They don't know if they did a good job or not.
Yeah. Like, what if the laying of the brick in that slow, methodical, boring process is your creative process?
I mean, I'm very excited.
And you need to lay brick. Yeah. But maybe that's how you come up with the next writing thing. Like, by laying brick is how you think. Then I think there's no danger of AI. In a way, we've like circled the conversation. Then you're going to lay brick to come up with the next good idea. And you're not going to ask AI to lay brick for you because then ultimately you're not going to be able to do your job. And so we'll find that the parts of your job that are routine, that don't lead to your creativity and good taste, you'll hand to an AI, and the parts of your job that are routine, that you do need, that feed your creativity, you will do. But at the end of the day, you'll choose. Right. You'll be the decider of what you want AI to do and what you don't want it to do, not your boss.
Right.
Because ultimately, your boss is just going to want the creative output.
Yeah.
And they're going to stop caring how you get there.
Yes. We definitely appreciate you taking the time with us today, Matt. It's been really fascinating.
That's great. We barely talked about Workday,
That's true.
Yes. Well, I think the idea is these old UIs and how quickly they're going to disappear because AI will operate them.
Yeah.
I think that's what fascinated me when I read the article. A couple of things. First, that you talked about Workday, but you also did a similar piece on Asana. And then I started beginning to see, like, well, both of these will be the same UI someday. And are they going to be like two crappy UIs that we pogo stick between like they are today, or are we going to see a whole new UI? And will it be Workday and Asana that create it, or will it be a new company that disrupts both of them?
On the record, I'm fine with anyone replacing any of them with anything else. I am old man yells at cloud when it comes to all of them.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us again here on Invisible Machines. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Always remember that you can watch this podcast too on our Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Head over to uxmag.com. We have a podcast page there where you can explore our back catalog and you can look at episodes centered around popular topics. Many, many thanks to our incredible production team here in the U.S. and in Ukraine: Elias Parker, Michael Litvinov, Allison Harshberger, Alla Slesarenko, Vera Pokodkov, and Darina Moskovchuk. Till next week, Owagi.